Okay, so welcome on our next lecture. Please welcome Patrycja Godlewska. And a fun fact from her life, actually Patrycja is a guitar player, and in her high school she even played in a rock band. Patrycja represents Pegasystems company. She's responsible for the growth of the Scrum Masters and Agile practices globally in her company. And now a series of questions. How do individual egos sabotage transformation effects? How do emotions can sabotage them? And how to override habits to overcome issues during the transformation. If you're curious about those questions, Patrycja will tell us about it. Please give warm welcome to Patrycja Godlewska.
Thank you very much, Anya, for this very, very warm welcome. I'm not nervous at all right now. You managed to cool me down. So I took part in a few transformations over the course of my, so to say, career. Being a QA, being a Scrum Master at some point, long time ago, a team manager as well. I was a part of plenty of transformation initiatives that happened at different companies. And it was quite an experience. On the one hand, humbling, on the other, enriching. But I thought that, hey, it needs to be something more to it, something that makes it a little bit less of a painful and frustrating experience for some people. And something that allows this transformation to basically flow, be effective and successful in the end. So I started digging, and what I'm going to talk about today is the lessons learned that helped me to understand how transformation process or flow works, why it doesn't work, and what to do to make sure that we are fine when this transformation is in progress. As this is driven by my experience, let me assure you that the story, all names and characters portrayed in this talk are fictitious. And obviously no animals were harmed in the making of this talk. So off to the very first story that happened some time ago. It's an episode about a Scrum Master and a product owner. Starring Anna, Scrum Master. She's quite new with the company. Her experience being a Scrum Master, 5 years, not bad. She's already been with 2 Agile transformations, and her goal is to make sure that the transformation that she supports at the company is successful. We have also George, who is almost 20 years in the company. He's an engineer at heart. He was forced to the role of the product owner by his boss. And over the course of these 20 years, he learned all of the irrelevant details about the product that the company is developing. So we have this beautiful conversation of Scrum Master and product owner. Scrum Master, Anya. Well, dear product owner, the team lacks clear goals for the next 2 sprints, and we would also like to discuss the recent progress and prepare for sprint review. Please prepare the product backlog. Yeah, okay, thanks for the feedback. I'll work on this backlog later on because now I have this very, very important customer issue that I need to take care of, and that's my top priority. But look at this Scrum Master, she's good. George, the team is stuck and needs your guidance. A little bit of blackmail is always good, right? You already skipped 1 sprint review, and Johan, our main customer and stakeholder, was very disappointed with the results of the sprint. You need to change. No pressure. I know I should change, product owner goes, but see, this customer issue is very interesting. I need to focus on this. And what's the sprint review anyway about? Why do we have so many meetings? And now look at that. Let's fast forward the sermon about all of the Scrum events, why Scrum is important, etc., etc. Anya tries to convince George that as the product owner, he needs to focus on the vision of the product. So no more interesting investigations of the issues, right? Let the team learn from the issue that you are now solving, my dear product owner. And let's see how this issue basically contributes to our backlog. And look at John. Oh, this is complicated. It will take time. It will be faster if I take care of this myself. And the backlog, well, we've never ever had one, and still look at this company. We are still alive. The product is successful, so what? What we observe in this conversation, and I believe this is a conversation that many Scrum Masters and product owners has had in the course of their careers, is making decision and justifying this decision. So this triangle here is to visualize how the decision process is made and how we try to justify the decisions that we made, especially if these are not necessarily obvious decisions or they have plenty of pros and cons to it. George needs to decide, should I solve this customer issue or should I work on the backlog? His decision, solving customer issue. That's what I've been doing for the past 20 years, and that's what I'm willing to do right now. Anya obviously keeps fingers crossed that he should choose working on the backlog. And each time John makes the decision that I'm going to solve the customer issue, he adds to his thinking more and more reasons for choosing this particular option. So it's no longer about, is this decision truly bringing value? It's why I made this decision. And the circle repeats and repeats and repeats. After a few iterations, so to say, of this thinking process, we are arriving at very far away corners of this triangle, which means there's plenty of distance between the two options. And we are no longer friends. Most probably we are already having some conflict, and the decision is not about what are we going to do and what are we contributing towards, but it's my choice and my choice is right. So we stop thinking about the goal, we start thinking about making sure that our decision is safe. This also leads to judging. So the more I am convinced that my choice was right, the more I am convinced that the other is wrong. And then if we have temperamental persons, they may either think or say to each other what they think about these decisions. In case of Anya, yeah, she's a good girl. So she just thinks about John that he's impossible, stubborn, unwilling to change. Just this. John, on the other hand, judges the situation. This is ridiculous, right? I've been in the business for years. She's telling me how to do software. She's questioning my job, wants me to do bureaucracy. We may also add to it that he's a seasoned engineer and she's just a young Scrum Master at the company. So what happens really right now? As we are on these two different sides of the spectrum of decision making, we may see that on these three levels that I mentioned, so ego, emotions, and habits, plenty of things are happening. First of all, our mind is making fun of us by the use of cognitive biases. In this very case, it's confirmation bias. And this confirmation bias works in a way that it makes sure that we see and we like things that are in line with our opinions, with what we are used to. Basically, we trust and believe in what is known for us. The other thing is the self-justification, so preventing the self-image. I made the right decision, so I'm going and I'm willing to justify it for as long as needed so that the self-image of myself that I have in my mind is still preserved. On the emotional part, yeah, Anya may be frustrated a little bit. She may also feel some resentment due to basically the reaction of George. And when it comes to habits, well, the habitual reply, product owner is unwilling to cooperate. Oh, I'll make him to cooperate. There is no thinking behind, are there any needs? No, it's just yes and no, the ping pong of opinions. George, on the other hand, not necessarily on the other hand. Confirmation bias and self-justification are for sure with George as well. Being an established developer in the company, having 20 years of experience, well, he has certain position, he has certain authority, so he's also focused on preserving his self-image. That's why self-justification and confirmation bias again. Yes, he's frustrated because this young lady comes here and says, you need to change the way how you work. She's very blunt about it. But there is also fear and sadness. Fear of what is going on, what this change is going to be about, why is this affecting my role at the company, why do I need to do things differently that I've been doing? Is this telling me that I was not a good employer for the past 20 years? And also the habit, so the preference of staying in the comfort zone, which means, again, I've been doing this for 20 years, why should I change right now? Let's dig even deeper. This is quite a very long list of whatever is happening and whatever is influencing Ania and George. Each of them has their own goals. Ania's goal is to prove that she is this great Scrum Master. She's this great influencer for change, driver of change. George's agenda would be to prove that, hey, I'm this very good engineer. I'm solving my customers' issues, real issues, not playing any bureaucracy that's enforced on me. Personality, yes, it's basically how we react to these different discussions. So based on personality, as I told you before, Ania could have just thought that, John is so unwilling to change. On the other hand, George may be also thinking about Ania or telling to Ania that, lady, I'm not necessarily happy with what you are suggesting me to do. There are habits, so our comfort zone, what we are accustomed to do, what we do basically on autopilot, how we react to things, and how we also work and react to any idea of what should be changed or improved. There are our values, so how we react again. Are we willing to change based on our values or not necessarily? Education. In case of John, 20 years in job of the engineer, he most probably has education and background in engineering, not necessarily being exposed to anything about leadership, change, openness, whatever, communication maybe even. Ania, most probably she has some more knowledge about change management, leadership, let's say all of the soft stuff that's required to work with people on a daily basis. Milieu meaning background, environment of what they are in. Language, now there are two layers of it. Language, it may be the native tongue, so first layer of how we communicate if something is natural to us or if we are speaking in the second language, how fluent are we in the second language, and also how fluently and easily we are able to express our opinions, our thoughts and feelings. And on the other hand, there is this language that we speak to with our peers. So specific hints of making jokes, making fun, making statements, using specific shortcuts, like shortcuts not in a way of abbreviations, but shortcuts of like thinking and conveying our thoughts and ideas. What may be a joke for Anna may not necessarily be a joke for George. Organizational culture, in the case of those two individuals, means that this is our common environment that we share. So assuming that we work for the same organization, we are in a vessel that conveys specific modes of behavior, what's accepted, what's not accepted, and how we should react to change. There is also belonging, which is related to this organizational culture. Ania, new to the company, she is rather an outsider, definitely not a person who would be friends with John from the first point of view. And then we have John, who has very strong feeling of belonging with the company. He is the insider of the company, so he knows its culture through its trenches. He has way more friends in the company. Echelon, corporate ladder, Anya being a Scrum Master somewhere at the back, and John very high at the ladder after these 20 years. And also social environment, which is anything. It may be family, it may be friends. So this is a platform where we can seek for commonalities that may build eventually some way of how we communicate with each other and how we may potentially solve the conflicts that arise when discussing how we should react to changes or proposed changes and solutions. So quite a long list, and this is not a full list. Now, having said that, and looking at this very low level, low granularity events, I would like to encourage you to think about a situation where you wanted someone to change a little bit. And think of which of the elements that I just listed here influenced this other person's reaction. What effect did it have also on you, on your ego? And what I would like you to do is to spend 60 seconds to think about it. And then I will ask you to do a little bit of talking with other people. So let's first time box it to 60 seconds for you to think about this change. I will start my timer. It will ring in 60 seconds. So 3, 2, 1, and go. Yeah. And you've got 30 seconds left. Ten seconds. Three, 2, 1. And that's it. So now, as we are at the conference, and one of the reasons for being at the conference is networking, I encourage you to find a person that you don't know, introduce yourself, and exchange your thoughts that you had. So let's move on. I know it's late in the afternoon. You have 2 minutes to self-organize and exchange the thoughts. One minute to go. Fifteen seconds. 3, 2, 1, and time's up. Okay, everyone, time's up. Don't make me do jumping jacks. Okay, hey, I'm still here. I'm still here. Get back. Okay, this buzz was very, very inspiring. Thanks for that. I hope you had good conversations and exchanged a few interesting experiences. So now, just to conclude this part, a few tips to take away. Yeah, be aware of your ego. Remember that others have egos too, right? So we want to prevent us ourselves, but there are other people who want to prevent themselves. And they have also their sense of feeling, their sense of belonging, their sense of worth, their self-image that they want to keep. Mind the context. So all of these factors that you just discussed in these small groups, in pairs. What is happening? What is influencing individuals? How it makes them feel, how it makes them respond. Stay humble and open to learning on a daily basis. So all of these experiences that influence, that can be part of the context too, all of this experience, this is something that we should be open to learn. And also question your own beliefs. So even though we saw Anya and George, Anya was so sure that he should be working on the issue. Was she even willing to learn what's the issue about, how to prioritize it? Has she opened up for showing a little bit of humbleness and respect that the guy has 20 years of experience in the company, so most probably he knows what he's doing. Most probably, because that's also not taken for granted. Let's move on to the episode 2, which is driving transformation. And let's look at it from a little bit of scale, just a little bit. This little bit is, before we go there, just one clarification. Transformation, to me, and how I understand this and how I want to talk about this in this very moment, is internalized change. And change is important because I will show you now a few change models and a few change flows, as I call them. So this change I treat always as a building block for the transformation. So a little disclaimer done. We have our John, no John, it's Johan, sorry. I forgot about his name. I mentioned him earlier. I mean, Anna mentioned him. You remember he wasn't very happy with the sprint review that George's team had. And Johan has been with the company for 3 years. Overall, he has 15 years of experience. Now he is this VP of product department. And he's extremely focused on quality and customer satisfaction. So after the 3 years at the company, Johan comes to the team and says, we need to start writing performance tests. Let's add them to our pipeline. Let's add them to our development lifecycle. We will put together a dashboard, display test results, and performance tests are now a part of our definition of done. Good luck. And off Johan went. And these poor guys, they have quite a few responses to it. One is like, new things, straight away to that. Cool. How cool is that? Another person says, yeah, it certainly has benefits. Let's see how this impacts team velocity. Yeah, you can tell that it's a Scrum Master, right? Team velocity, Scrum Master, obvious. There's another developer, quality for the win. Let's do it. No questions, just let's do it. But another one, yeah, it's that work. We'll slow down. We'll need this, we'll need that. Not necessarily that compelling vision. Yet another guy is not convinced at all. Adding more performance tests, yeah, potentially complicating our process. And God forbid if there are any traces that the performance of our app is not necessarily satisfying, we will realize that we really have a problem. And we have our George, who's been always good with what is here, and now he has to change things. So again, not necessarily the happiest of the persons here on this slide. Whom are we really dealing with? That's a part about people. Again, diffusion of innovations. That's this bell curve about very, very old model from the 60s, but still valid. And how does it apply to us and to people who are on the market and should embrace a little bit of innovation or a new product? In our case, this can be also this change initiative of writing performance tests. We have innovators, so people who invent these things. They don't need to be convinced that change is good and they should follow the change. We have early adopters, so let's call them change leaders, enjoying changing environment, people willing to learn new things, very happy about experimenting. After that, early majority, so people who would need a little bit of buy-in and invitations to take the new product and use it for on daily basis or to adapt to a new situation. And then we have also late majority. So also lots of people, as you can see, this is 34%. People who will follow only when they see that the solution is really well thought through, that it's valuable, that others use it, it works for others, so they will mimic this behavior. Otherwise, they won't give their, they won't buy the product, they won't invest in this change. And last but not least, laggards. So that's a group of people unwilling to make any change, unwilling to step out of their comfort zone, unwilling to question, to change their habits. And basically, these guys need to be almost forced into the change. Where to focus our efforts when we are in the transformation? We should focus them on this group that's really willing to change. And it may seem at first a little bit unfair, right? Because, oh, we are leaving these people who need this more reasons for investing in the change, who are left aside, maybe feeling sad and lonely, who knows, we'll learn later on. But these guys here, their energy, their buy-in, their willingness, this is something that will help us drive this change faster, more effectively. This is the group of people who will give us more feedback. This is the group of people who will be willing to contribute more to what is happening right now. They will be willing to make more impact, share their own ideas, and potentially make this change effort even better. When it comes to the pyramid of choice that we saw previously on the level of Anna and George, now this again may be we may see this again on two levels, on the individual level. So between individuals, we have different developers and the kitchen fights about performance tests. Are we writing this? Are we not writing this? But it also is responsible for creating subgroups, so to say. So on these different sides, different corners of this triangle, we have one group that's willing to write performance tests, the other that's not really willing to do this, which means we have polarized groups. And if these groups are not willing to talk with themselves, then we have a conflict. Again, polarized groups, this is not the type of the conflict that would add value, that would provoke some additional changes, that would inspire more changes or improved process. This is the conflict which means my choice, my opinion is better than yours. So not necessarily something that brings more value. That's to be avoided, and that's the role of the change transformation leaders, however we call these people, agile coaches, scrum masters, people who are willing to introduce change. They need to take care of it and prevent this type of situation. How to do it? Ego, emotions, habits, change models. How does this work together? There are plenty of books written about change models, of organizational cultures, like entire libraries filled with these positions, hundreds of pages. I picked two models. The first one is by William Bridges. The reason is that he focuses on individuals in his model. And as he perceives and describes change, it's about three phases, so endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings. When it comes to endings that are first, interestingly, it's about realizing that we are losing something that we knew, something that we liked, something we were accustomed to, all of our habits. It goes to the trash because we need to do something new. So that's the moment when people tend to be sad, frustrated, a little bit maybe even depressed about the fact that there needs to be some change. Then there is neutral zone, so this in-between process. We lost what we knew, we are not there yet, which means we not necessarily know what is this new, shiny process, product, behavior, whatever our transformation wants to achieve. And this neutral zone is a little bit of letting go. So, okay, we lost it. We are facing something new. Yeah, whatever. We have to comply. And then new beginnings. So this moment when we realize, okay, so that's what it's about. That's the purpose. These are the goals. That's how I can contribute. And this gives people new energy to move forward with the change, to contribute to the change, and really internalize the change. That's when the transformation happens. When basically the change, the elements of this change are running in our veins. Another model is by Edgar Schein. He created, it's called Stages of and Cycles of Learning / Change. And for Schein, change is all about learning. So it's unfreezing, unlearning of what's the status quo for a company, for a group of people, for a specific person. It needs to be amplified by some motivation to change, so some compelling vision. As in case of endings, there's this moment where we need to communicate what we want to achieve, what are the next steps, to be transparent about what's next. Then there comes learning new concepts, new meanings for old concepts, and new standards. And this is all done when it's internalized. This internalization is also called refreezing. So again, we unfroze something that was set in stone, we change it, learn new things, and now we are freezing this again to build a new culture, new modes of operation, new habits. What are the threats here? As Schein observed, there is an effect called learning anxiety. So as in case of George, he was not necessarily willing to learn or asked a question, so what type of performance test are we going to write, how to do it, where do we start, etc. In case of many developers that you saw on this curve, the fusion of innovation, also there were some people who were already willing to invest and to learn, and others were very skeptical about it. Learning anxiety says that people are afraid of failing by learning new things. So whenever tasked with a new experience, new challenge, some people will react with fear of losing the face, that, hey, I'm incapable of learning, or hey, I'm making too many mistakes. What does this mean? How does this affect my self-image? So this is also something that we need to take care of. And another model, which is not a change model, but something that really can be seen here, what's happening here on the individual level, so each and every person goes through this, is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model of 5 stages of grief. When we lose something, her model is about losing a relative, a friend. But when we lose something that we really much care for, then we go through this denial phase. So no, this is not happening. This can't be true. Then we are angry. So how come? How come does this Scrum Master tell me that I need to write performance tests or that I need to work on the backlog? Then there's bargaining. Oh, if only I did this, then maybe I can avoid writing backlog, or I can avoid learning these new things. Depression. Yeah, okay, nothing can be done. I need to comply. So this may be mapped somewhere to the neutral zone. And then at the end is acceptance. There's nothing I can do. I need to comply with the new reality. To make things even more complicated, the bad message is that it's not necessarily that linear, and it's different for each and every person. So over time, how we react to it, how we go through the change, what changes in us and how we react, it depends on individual level, and it depends also on how the organizational structure is built, what's the culture of the organization when it comes to going through the change. So again, our long list on that's working on individual level of individual contributors. I won't go through this again, I promise. What I want to right now put your attention to is that this list stands behind each and every person that is involved in this change. And this list affects this time required for people to be able to go through the change. So am I mourning the loss, the change, what happened? Am I at this endings phase as described by Bridges for 3 months, for 6 months, for 3 years? Or is this for me like 5 minutes and then I'm done, I'm following, I'm moving on? Because I'm more interested in what's next. It's also about our personality, it's also about our values. On the organization level, the list, I would say, is a little bit shorter, because we are not talking about each and every individual. We are talking about an entity, which is organization that has its goals, like making money or going to Mars or whatever. I tend to claim that organizations have their personalities, so how they like to be perceived, what's their image. If we are all driving black Mercedes cars with silver details to it, or if we want to be more spontaneous about it. What are the habits in the organization? So, well, those of you who changed places, let's say, my experience, very funny example that I like to give. At the company that I worked for, the habit was that at 11:30 we started, people would start talking about where do we go for lunch. At 12 we would leave, and at 1 we would be back at the office. At another company that I worked for, nothing like that happened. So for me, the first month was like, why aren't we discussing where we would go for lunch? Because that's what was the habit. And it's something also that struck people who would come to this company that, so do we really need half an hour to decide where we go for lunch? I give this example just to show that it's these small, tiny things that happen on a daily basis that build this personality and habits of the organization. There are also values. Each company likes to show that, hey, these are our values, that's how we operate. At some levels, these values are more respected. At some, they are less respected, but still it's basically the self-image of the organization, how this organization wants to be perceived, the language of the organization. So here comes the entire array of abbreviations, what's fine to say at the organization, what's not fine to say, how we call people who are, let's say, at the very beginning of the career. How do we call people who have bigger responsibilities at the company, and also the structure. How the ladder is built, how people are respected, how the ladder influences the authority. So again, thought exchange. You've all been through different changes. You wanted to make some change in your organization. So think about one of these and think also which element of your organization's culture could support the change and which of these would impede it. And again, I'll give you 60 seconds to think about it. So timer, here's my timer. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and go. 3, 2, 1, and we're done. And now you should have this habit built in you that when I tell that the timer's done, you need to stand up, find another person that you don't know in this room, and exchange these thoughts. And you have 2 minutes for this right now. So timer is starting right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and time's up. All right, time's up. 2 minutes. Already 2 minutes. Yes, already 2 minutes. Time flies. All right, so now I'm sure you have plenty of more interesting insights to add to this particular slide. So from my point of view, like strong culture is difficult to change. So the stronger the habits, the organizational culture is, it's more difficult to change because we need to unlearn more, we need to learn more new things. Also, what may help is defining small and specific objectives. And these objectives will lead us to the final effect in smaller steps that feel to be smaller chunks of knowledge that we need to acquire, like smaller leaps that we need to take. And also, what I hope could be visible through the entire course of what we are talking about is that emotions of individuals can hinder or they can also advance change. So again, we had the group of followers who are enthusiastic about the change. They would be our, let's call them apostles, or our ambassadors that would promote the change. And on the other hand, we had laggards whose passive attitude, whose unwillingness to change, unwillingness to experiment, affected also our motivation, but the entire change process. So now, how does this all affect you, the individual person in any type of change or transformation? So there are two sides to it. The first side is how you see you. So, or how I see me in that case. Self-esteem, self-efficacy. So my internal phase of what I want to fight for, what I want to still keep, how I want to be perceived by others, what's my ideal what are the ideal outcomes, what are my conscious and unconscious, regards Dr. Freud, goals. There are emotions which trigger our behaviors, and this is also tightly related with habits. So whatever is our comfort zone, what we have learned, how we learn the default reactions triggered by these emotions, that's our default mode of operation. So this requires our awareness of how I want to react instead of just doing this on autopilot. On the other hand, it's how others see us in this change. So what type of, let's say, position authority we have, that if others like us, if they feel we are insiders or outsiders. Also, what emotions, if we are predictable, if we have empathy, or are we just triggers, elements of the machine. And also if our automated actions are really automated, or if they feel like they are ingrained in what requires to be done. So a list of tips, yet another one to conclude. Again, small and specific objectives will definitely help, be it on small individual level. In case of Anna and George, it would be not necessarily you need to write the entire product backlog and you have 30 seconds for that. It could be more like negotiating and understanding the needs of George. Then involve the right people as early as possible. Again, this diffusion of innovation and people who are willing to take part in the change, who are willing to lead this change and support us in these efforts. To a degree, it's also important that we should build on individuals' needs. Let's observe how they react to change, what are their needs, and let's address them. If they need more communication, let's communicate more. If they need more specific goals, let's specify these goals. Respect the current culture and past change experiences. That's something that would be also a great advantage on our end, to understand how the company works currently, how the organization works, how people in this organization are accustomed to working, and also what do we do about it. It shouldn't be like in case of Anna and George, that George had these thoughts of she's diminishing how I've worked for 20 years. It should be building on this, and more like it should be more of an evolution than a revolution. Also, what's important to acknowledge is this period of rewriting habits, and this can take whatever time. For some people, it will be quick. For others, it will take months or even years. But we need to be mindful about it. And last but not least, whatever we do, let's do it in the right context, in the context of specific person's needs, in the context of team's needs, in the context of organization, culture, and habits. So that's the end of this story. Thank you very much.
La la la. Okay, great. So once again, based on experience, third time, we have some tips and tricks here, and I just think what is better, to introduce the change to the individuals first during one-to-ones, so then we can try to identify who will be the follower and who will be the laggard, and or rather introduce the change to the whole team and then wait what will happen.
That's a tricky one. It depends. The most professional answer I can give is it depends. Based on my experience, truth be told, my first thought is that if you work with teams on daily basis, you basically know who you work for, and you can predict more or less how people would react and what they would need to be effective in change. On the other hand, question is what the impact of the change would be. I would rather start with teams, not necessarily individuals, because if we start with individuals and God forbid we have a coffee break between these discussions, then it means that in the kitchen we already have plenty of different discussions going on how anything would be understood. And this may cause a lot of rumors, which would from the very beginning kill our efforts. So I think I would start with, and as I took part in these, first with teams or groups that evolve around specific product or specific area, and then make sure that on this individual level it's done very well.
Hello. So I have a question about this small and specific objectives. Right now, it's hard for me to wrap my head around this. Can you give some examples of maybe, for a change that you introduced or you have been part of, a small and specific objective?
Mm-hmm. So one of the first examples that I would give right now is at Pega Systems. Currently, we wanted to give new life to Scrum Masters community of practice. The story was that it was operating for some time, that it somehow dissolved itself, and then there was this idea, let's revive this. And at first, we spent a lot of time thinking how this community should act, how this should work and whatnot, drawing perfect picture of how it would look like, and that we would achieve it during the first meeting, which was not necessarily realistic. And then the small objectives became that we would improve from meeting to meeting. So collecting feedback, building on the feedback, and experimenting. After the year that passed, the meetings were happening on monthly basis. So it's almost a year since we started. And already the community, yes, it happens. The attendance is, I think, around 50-60% of all of the Scrum Masters in the company. So it's not that bad. The idea obviously would be 100%, but it's impossible anyway. And I think that the key here was that, okay, we have this vision that the community is working, but on the other hand, we worked on these small objectives. So let's first of all show the value by each and every meeting improving and really answering the needs of Scrum Masters. So that was this. It's not like the transformation, it's more, again, like adding another building block to how the company is operating. Like what's the habit?
All right, cool, thanks.
Okay, so we have a chance for last question. Okay, if no questions, I would like to thank you, Patrycja.
Thank you very much.